Magic existed in this world, but for most of recorded history, only a small number of people had been able to wield it. That imbalance mattered, because the monsters roaming the land possessed strength beyond anything ordinary soldiers could oppose. Even elite royal knights and paladins were often helpless before the greatest beasts, whose terrifying legends survived for generations. One man refused to accept that humanity had to live beneath that threat forever. Many dismissed his ambition as madness, yet he devoted his life to understanding magic. His knowledge and power steadily grew until he founded an organization dedicated to the study of the arcane. By the age of 64, he had become the most respected mage of his era. His name was Aldrin Valor. By then, every kingdom knew of Aldrin and the achievements that had earned him their trust. With the support of the people and the rulers of 8 kingdoms, he finally prepared to pursue the dream that had guided his entire life: the complete eradication of the monsters and beasts that destroyed villages, slaughtered travelers, and kept humanity trapped in fear. For years, Aldrin and the Magic Investigation Society searched for a way to destroy the monsters in a single operation. Their research eventually led them to the Philosopher's Stone. The method was theoretically possible, but the traditional process required an enormous sacrifice of living beings as a catalyst. Aldrin refused to build his solution on human lives. Instead, he designed a 3-part plan. First, a ritual would draw life energy from every creature within a radius of 3 kilometers and gather it inside a suitable vessel. Second, the vessel would have to be made from materials strong enough to withstand the combined pressure of vast amounts of magic and life energy. Third, the monsters had to be lured into the ritual area before the extraction began. To accomplish that, Aldrin requested the aid of the 8 kingdoms and all 2,540 members of the Magic Investigation Society, commonly called the MIS. Experiments conducted by the society revealed that most monsters reacted to a particular magical pulse. A common blue mineral known as blue howlite could produce that pulse when infused with the correct amount of mana. Since the crystal was easy to find in caves, the researchers believed they could use it to draw thousands of creatures toward a single location. The vessel posed a far greater challenge. The best-known material was phantom quartz, a rare transparent crystal capable of containing both magic and life energy. The 8 kingdoms jointly financed an expedition to find the largest piece available. Months later, only a third of the expedition returned. They had succeeded, but at a terrible cost, bringing back a phantom quartz crystal as large as a carriage. By then, Aldrin had already selected a mountain cave for the ritual and secured enough blue howlite to create the necessary magical pulse. Once every preparation was complete, he led 2,000 mages to the mountain. They formed a wide ring around it and placed yellow quartz crystals at their assigned positions. Those crystals amplified their mana, allowing them to maintain the immense defensive barrier needed to protect the ritual. Before the operation began, Aldrin addressed them. "My fellow mages, the creatures before us threaten humanity's very existence. Today, we stop waiting for them to come for us. Today, we take the fight to them. We will free our lands from fear and set a better future in motion." At his signal, the mages stationed near the summit infused the blue howlite with mana. Within hours, the first monsters appeared. The barrier prevented them from reaching the mages, while the pulsing crystals continued to call more creatures from every direction. No one knew how many monsters would answer. Aldrin therefore waited until the valleys and plains surrounding the mountain were filled throughout the entire 3-kilometer ritual zone. For 7 days, the creatures kept coming. When the flow finally stopped, and monsters covered the land as far as anyone could see, Aldrin ordered the extraction to begin. The mages moved into their designated positions. After 30 minutes of preparation, a vast magic circle formed in the sky and descended over the mountain, enclosing the full ritual area. The weakest monsters collapsed first. Within 10 hours, almost half of the gathered creatures were dead. The remaining beasts resisted for 3 more days before the circle finally stripped away the last of their life energy. Exhausted but convinced the operation had succeeded, Aldrin allowed himself to relax. The surviving mages shouted in triumph. Their celebration lasted only moments. The phantom quartz began to heat rapidly. Cracks spread across its surface, and Aldrin understood the mistake immediately. Even a crystal the size of a carriage was too small to contain that much concentrated life energy. The vessel was approaching its breaking point. Aldrin ordered a small group of mages to flee with every record of the experiment, so the world would learn what had happened. He and the others remained behind, pouring their power into the failing crystal in an attempt to delay the explosion. Their combined effort bought only 2 hours. The energy inside the vessel had already become corrupted. If released, it would spread across the world and mutate living organisms into new magical beasts. With no way to stop the catastrophe, Aldrin chose to give future generations a weapon against what was coming. He gathered the remaining mage's power into himself and cast one final creation spell. By fusing that spell with the phantom quartz, he caused the energy released by the explosion to form magic boxes, each containing a powerful magical element that could one day be wielded against the monsters. Aldrin consumed his body, mana, and life force to complete the spell. When the phantom quartz finally ruptured, the blast erased the 1-kilometer-high mountain and killed every mage who had remained there. The light of the explosion could be seen from all 8 kingdoms. A month later, the kingdoms sent a rescue party to search for the mages who had escaped with the research. Once the surviving records reached the Miss, the scale of the disaster became clear. The magic boxes scattered across the continent remained a mystery, but the society immediately began investigating the condition of the world. 2 months after the explosion, the MIS confirmed that Aldrin's ritual had destroyed roughly 80% of the land-dwelling monsters. The magical corruption was also less catastrophic than he had feared. Some animals grew larger or developed strange mutations, while the plants and creatures nearest the blast site became unnaturally aggressive. Yet the most important change affected humanity itself. Every human being could now sense mana. Before the Great Explosion, that gift had belonged only to a chosen few. In the years that followed, the MIS also discovered the purpose of the magic boxes. They were Aldrin's final gift. Weapons created to help humanity survive the new age of monsters. Their power, however, could not be claimed freely. Each box imposed conditions that had to be fulfilled before its magic would answer a user. 924 years later, this history was being recited in a classroom where one student appeared to be paying no attention at all. Elara sat near the back of the classroom with her head tilted toward an open book. Her eyes were closed, and the slow rise and fall of her shoulders made it obvious that she had drifted off again. The teacher had seen this more times than she cared to count. Elara was bright enough to answer almost anything when she tried. Yet she treated half her lessons as an invitation to sleep. The teacher closed the history book, set it on the desk, and clapped twice. The scattered whispers died away. Listen carefully. I'm going to find out who actually followed today's lesson. What was Aldrin trying to accomplish? Several students raised uncertain hands. Others stared at their desks and hoped not to be chosen. The teacher let the silence stretch, then noticed that Elara had not moved at all. Elara, she called. Is my history class so boring that you decided to sleep through it? Elara jerked upright. Her hair had fallen across one cheek, and it took her a moment to focus on the room. I wasn't sleeping, she protested. I was only taking a cat nap. Laughter spread through the class. The teacher folded her arms, more amused than angry now. Then perhaps you can explain the difference. Elara pressed a finger to her chin as though the question required serious thought. When I sleep, I can't hear anything around me. During a catnap, I still hear everything the teacher says, so I sleep at home and catnap at school. Even the teacher had to pause before answering. She reopened the book and turned several pages. Very well. Let's test your remarkable ability to listen while unconscious. Ask away, Elara replied, settling back into her chair with sudden confidence. The teacher began with Aldrin's real name. Elara recognized the trap at once. History never recorded his birth name. Everyone knew him by the mage name he used after founding the MIS. That is correct, the teacher said. But it was also the easy question. Do not expect the final examination to be so generous. She moved on to the crystal, used as the vessel during the life energy extraction ritual. Phantom quartz, Elara answered immediately. A transparent crystal with a hardness of 7. Another correct answer. For the final question, the teacher asked her to explain the Great Explosion. Elara took a little longer this time. It was the event that reset the calendar. We count the years from the day Aldrin Valor nearly erased the monsters from the surface of the world. 924 years have passed since then. The teacher waited, clearly expecting more. Elara understood the hint. She added that the explosion had changed humanity itself, allowing every person to sense and use at least a little mana. It had also spread corrupted magic through nature, creating the beasts and mutants that still threaten settlements. Humanity survived largely because Aldrin's magic boxes had appeared after the disaster. Good, the teacher said, closing the book. That is the answer I wanted. It seems you really were listening. Elara gave the class a victorious look. I hope you answer just as well tomorrow, the teacher continued. I would rather not spend another year waking you up. I'll do my best. It is my final year. After all, the teacher returned to her desk while the class laughed again. Elara had escaped punishment, but only because her memory was better than her sleeping habits. When the final bell rang, the other students gathered their belongings and left. Elara packed more slowly, considering how to spend the remaining hours before nightfall. Since the history examination might be difficult, she decided to visit the library and study. She selected several books she had not yet read, and settled at a table. A few hours of dry historical material proved stronger than her determination. Before long, she was asleep again, face down among the open books. Night fell while she slept. Eventually, one of her hands shifted and knocked a heavy volume from the table. The crash woke her with a start. Elara looked around the dark library in confusion, then hurried to the nearest window. The moment she realized how late it was, panic replaced her drowsiness. Her father was going to kill her, she decided, and her mother might cook her for dinner afterward. She grabbed her belongings and ran. On the road home, Elara caught up with 2 city guards on patrol. The sound of rapid footsteps made one of them turn sharply and lower his spear. Who goes there? Identify yourself. Elara slowed, raised one hand, and walked into the light. Relax, Kale. It's only me. The guard lowered the weapon. Relief crossed Kalen's face before irritation replaced it. By Aldrin's beard, how many times do I have to tell you? My name is Kalen. And what are you doing outside this late? I fell asleep in the library, Elara admitted. Then, because she could never resist provoking him, she added, I dreamed about you too. Kalen glanced around the road for movement and told his partner to keep watch. Oren grinned. Take your time with your girlfriend. I've got the road. She is not my girlfriend, Kalen muttered before turning back to Elara. And don't try to distract me. This district is safer than most, but bandits and mirelings still come through. A 14-year-old should not be wandering around alone after dark. Elara lowered her head and pretended to wipe away a tear. I'm turning 15 in 2 months. That does not make this less dangerous. And don't interrupt while I'm lecturing you. He paused, remembering something more urgent. Garrick's shift had ended 3 hours earlier, which meant Elara's father was probably already home. You should run, Kalen told her. We checked the road up to here, and it's clear, but do not tell your father you met us. He'll kick me across the training yard if he learns I let you walk home alone. Elara passed the guards and waved over her shoulder. Have a pleasant patrol. Don't worry, Kale. Dad will never know. Kalen, he called after her, but she had already disappeared into the darkness. Oren waited until she was out of sight before leaning closer. She likes you. She is a child who comes to the training hall every week to annoy me. You're 18, not 80. Wait a few years. Kalen gave him a flat look. Finish the patrol, Oren. The teasing stopped, though Oren's grin remained. By the time Elara reached her neighborhood, every house was dark. Her own windows were unlit as well. Either her parents were asleep and she risked waking them, or they had not yet returned and she could enter unnoticed. The door was locked, but Elara had a spare key. Inside, she found the house empty. She left her school bag in her room, changed into her pajamas, ate something from the kitchen, and went to bed. Later that night, the opening of the front door woke Elara. She hurried into the hall and found her parents returning from a rare evening at the tavern. Now this is a surprise, she said. What made both of you go drinking? Garrick looked guilty. Did we wake you, Ella? I'm sorry. Tomorrow is your last day at school. I thought you would already be asleep. I only went to bed a little while ago, studying hard then. He smiled proudly and headed toward the kitchen for water. Celine stayed beside Elara and lowered her voice. Today was our 5th wedding anniversary. We went into town to celebrate. We would have taken you with us if you had come home in time. Garrick returned before she could say more. We waited as long as we could, he said. Then his expression turned suspicious. What kept you out so late? Don't tell me you were with some boy. Kaylin, perhaps? Elara's face warmed at once. No, I was studying for the examination, and KL is only a friend. Celine gave Garrick a light punch in the stomach. That is enough. Come to bed. But, Celine, I was only bed. Now. She caught his arm and pulled him away before he could embarrass their daughter further. Elara returned to her room smiling despite herself. Morning came quickly. At breakfast, Garrick ate faster than everyone else and began fastening his city guard equipment. Thanks for the meal, Ella. Good luck today. You are clever enough to pass even after sleeping through half your classes. I was catnapping, Elara corrected him. There is a difference. Celine opened her arms as Garrick reached the door. Aren't you forgetting something? He turned, embraced her, and kissed her gently. How could I forget my beautiful wife? I was saving the best for last. After he left, Elara packed her books and told Celine she might remain at school for a while after the examinations. Take your time, her mother said. It is your last day. Enjoy it with your friends. Elara thanked her, shouldered her bag, and set off. On the road to school, Elara found Kaylin arguing with several rough-looking men. One wore the badge of the Hunters Guild and carried himself like someone accustomed to using a magic box. The man stood close enough to Kaylin that there was no mistaking the threat in his voice. Kaylin, my friend, I thought we had an agreement. I have already sent plenty of gold your way. Why am I still waiting? Kaylin lifted both hands. Draven, everything is under control. Give me one more day. Elara ran toward them before he could say anything else. Kale, are these men causing trouble? Kaylin's face lost what little color it had. Where did you come from? And it is Kaylin. She ignored the correction. Are you still upset because I beat your record at the training course last week? Draven watched the exchange with open interest. Kaylin forced his voice to remain calm. Having some muscle does not make you an adult. Everything here is under control. Do the mature thing and go to school. No need to be a jerk about it. Elara gave the strangers one last look, then walked away. Behind her, Draven laughed and slapped Kaylin on the back. You have a charming girl there. I like her already. Elara glanced over her shoulder. Kaylin was staring after her with a pale, rigid face. Draven leaned closer to him. One day, that is all you have left. A look at her mana-powered wristwatch ended Elara's curiosity. Only 10 minutes remained before class, and she was barely halfway to school. She sprinted the rest of the distance and arrived with 5 minutes to spare. While waiting outside the classroom, she reviewed her notes until the teacher called everyone inside. Examination papers covered history, mathematics, and grammar, with 2 hours allowed for completion. Elara finished in a little over an hour. She checked every answer twice before taking the paper to the teacher. The teacher read through it and smiled. Well. The girl who sleeps through my lessons has passed all 3 sections. As I told you, I only catnap. Catnapping and sleeping are the same thing. Of course they are. Elara grinned and escaped before the teacher could respond. Outside, she dropped onto a bench and considered going home. Celine had given her the entire day, and a better idea soon took hold. She would learn how to become an adventurer, since she would turn 15. In 2 months, she might soon qualify for low-level assignments or work as an assistant. She could also register with the Hunters Guild and begin the life she had imagined for years. Elara returned to the library and spent hours studying guild regulations, adventuring work, monster classifications, and the requirements for new hunters. When she finally left, she was eating her favorite variety of apple, the crisp and sweet Aldrin Gold. The sun was already sinking. Elara walked at an unhurried pace, though everyone knew the roads became dangerous after dark. In the distance, corrupted animals and magical beasts called through the wilderness. A hand touched Elara's shoulder from behind. She screamed, tore herself free, and spun around. Kaylin stood there laughing. So the girl who broke my training record can still be frightened by a tap on the shoulder. Elara pressed one hand to her chest until her breathing slowed. You said I was still a little girl. Little girls are allowed to be scared. Kaylin's laughter faded. Fair enough. I should not have startled you. There is a place nearby I want to show you before we go home. Elara agreed readily. When he remarked that she sounded very grown-up, she reminded him that her mother had allowed her to stay out as long as she wanted. That, Kaylin said, made you sound like a child again. Keep teasing me, and I'll punch you in the knee. He raised both hands. No violence, I surrender. As they walked, Elara leaned forward with her hands behind her back. A question rose to her lips before she had time to stop it. Kale, do you think I'm a track? She froze, turned red, and looked away. Kaylin tilted his head. Could you repeat that? I asked whether you think I'm athletic, she said quickly. I train with the city guard all the time. He considered her for a moment. You are strong for your age. You started training when you were 9? Didn't you? My father brought me once. It looked fun, so I kept coming back. After 15 minutes, they reached an old campsite hidden away from the road. It contained a fire pit, several stones used as seats, tall grass, and the remains of a broken tree. Kaylin began building a fire, while Elara sat opposite him. She looked around. We walked all this way for this? I wanted somewhere quiet to talk. Once the flames steadied, Kaylin rested his arms on his knees. You have finished school. What comes next? Elara admitted that she had not settled on every detail. She wanted to join the city guard first, following Garrick and Kaylin. After gaining experience, she hoped to enter the Hunters Guild, begin with smaller assignments, and eventually travel as an adventurer. Why choose two dangerous lives? Kaylin asked. Instead of answering, she turned the question back on him. Why did you become a guard? Kaylin watched the sunset beyond the trees. His father had served in the same role, protecting people from beasts and criminals. As a child, Kaylin had believed that made him a hero. And now that you achieved the dream? Elara asked. The uniform is real. The heroic part was mostly in my imagination. He stirred the fire with a branch. The work is dangerous, the pay is ordinary, and most people never know what a guard prevents. That is why I want to understand why you would choose it. Elara rose and stretched toward the darkening sky. One day, I want to build a town of my own. Kaylin looked up at her. She explained that she needed strength, experience, and knowledge of other settlements. Adventuring would allow her to travel and learn what made a town prosper or fail. She had even chosen a name. Arl Haven. Kaylin repeated it slowly. That is a beautiful name. He warned her that most new adventurers earned little. The lucrative work belonged to experienced hunters, and treasure hunting killed people who rushed into it. Elara knew. She was prepared to serve as a guard for years if necessary, then accept larger missions when she was ready. The dream did not need to happen quickly. It only needed to remain possible. Kaylin suggested applying to the MIS for a magic box trial. Even a 1-star user could earn good money. Elara shook her head. The school had already tested her compatibility, and her score was too low to qualify. He had forgotten that schools now perform the test. He had left education early and started working after his father was gone. Elara carefully mentioned what Garrick had once told her. Kaylin had been forced to support his family while still young. Anger flashed across his face. Your father should learn not to discuss other people's lives. He did not tell anyone else. And he only told me because I asked why you left school. Kaylin stared into the flames. It is not a secret. I simply do not enjoy speaking about it. Elara accepted the boundary and changed the subject. So where is the interesting place you promised me? Kaylin gestured around them. This is it. I came here often when I was younger. She studied the mossy stones and the decaying tree. Under her breath, she complained that he could at least have shown her his room instead of dragging her to a ruin. What did you say? That it is peaceful. Kaylin gave her a tired smile. You can call it a dump. I know what it looks like. Darkness settled around the fire, bringing the calls of nocturnal animals from the forest. Elara glanced toward the road. We should go somewhere safer. Your house would be safer. Kaylin reached into the bag beside him and removed a flask. We will leave soon. You must be thirsty. I made fresh Aldrin Gold apple juice this morning. Elara accepted it eagerly. His apple juice was one of her favorites. You never let me taste the wine, and I still will not. She raised the flask and drank. The first mouthful stopped her. It was not apple juice. The bitter traces beneath the water were familiar from books, poppy and valerian root, both used in sleeping draughts. Elara lowered the flask and stared at him. Why? Her fingers were already losing strength. She tried to stand, but her knees failed. Kaylin, what did you put in this? He caught her before she struck the ground. Elara tried to push him away, yet her arms barely moved. The fire blurred, and the trees leaned across her vision. Tell me why, she whispered. Kaylin lowered her carefully beside the stones. His hands shook. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to come to this. She could no longer focus on his face. I hope that one day you find a way to forgive me. A tear fell from Kaylin's cheek and landed on hers. Then the campsite disappeared into darkness. After Elara was fully unconscious, Kaylin remained beside her in silence, struggling to control his breathing. He pressed both hands against his chest, but his heart continued to pound. At last, he pulled out a bottle of Aldrin Gold apple wine and emptied it in several gulps. 15 minutes later, he took a flashbang crystal from his bag, infused it with mana, and detonated it above the campsite. The signal brought Draven and his group within 10 minutes. Draven approached Kaylin with exaggerated praise, claiming that only a strong man could have done what he had done. If the job succeeded, Draven promised him an additional reward. Kaylin knocked the hand from his shoulder. He did not care about the mission, the men involved, or any extra payment. He wanted to know what would happen to Elara after he left. Draven's manner became serious. He assured Kaylin that they were not animals and had no intention of harming her. An MIS member was traveling with them, he pointed out. They had needed a volunteer for the mission, but no one had agreed, forcing them to obtain a suitable subject another way. Kaylin watched the man wearing white gloves kneel beside Elara and use magical instruments to measure her physical and magical condition. The procedure resembled the mana assessment Kaylin had taken before joining the guard. He asked whether she would be released once the mission ended. Draven said that, assuming everything went according to plan, the MIS would take custody of her. He would collect his payment and leave. What happened afterward was not his concern. More importantly, Kaylin was never to reveal what had occurred. Kaylin promised to carry the secret to his grave. Then he told Draven to forget he existed. This had been his first dirty job, and it would be his last. Draven watched him disappear down the road as the cries of wild creatures grew louder. In the darkness, the MIS researcher completed his examination, packed his instruments, and joined him. The researcher, Corvin, asked whether they intended to camp there until morning. Draven explained that his men were bringing mana-powered four-wheelers to collect them. Corvin was more concerned about Kaylin. Leaving a witness alive seemed foolish. Draven stopped him. Kaylin had been seen speaking with the group on multiple occasions. Killing him now would attract questions and might delay the mission. Besides, the young guard still had his whole life ahead of him. Draven already disliked thinking about what awaited the girl and had no desire to add another unnecessary death. He asked Corvin whether Elara was suitable. Corvin dismissed Kaylin as an unimportant guard whom no one would believe. As for the girl, he was impressed. Draven seemed to have an unusual talent for finding useful people. Draven jokingly warned him not to mock his age. He was only 34. Corvin stepped away and returned to the examination results. Elara was in excellent health. Her body was strong and well-trained. Draven interrupted to mention that she had apparently beaten Kaylin on the city guard training course. After clearing his throat, Corvin finished the important part. Elara possessed a 5-star mana pool, larger than he had expected. Her physical condition and magical capacity made her an exceptionally promising subject, provided the operation proceeded as planned. Satisfied by the examination results, Draven waited until Kaylin had disappeared down the road. Then he sat on a nearby boulder and faced Corvin. We have the girl. What happens next? Corvin opened his bag and spread maps, compatibility records, and several pages of research across the ground. His MIST team had discovered an unknown magic box with a black shell, golden ornamentation, and red gems. No one knew what power it contained. We do know her compatibility, Corvin said, glancing toward Elara. 36%. Draven frowned. Then why not place one of your own researchers inside? That is how I received earth magic. We already tried. The first subjects had remained inside for less than a minute. The box produced crushing magical pressure, and several of the researchers had barely survived. Those with compatibility below 20% suffered the worst injuries. Corvin spoke about them as failed measurements rather than people. The box is the final stage. he continued. Before we use it again, the subject needs something that allows repeated recovery. He tapped a route on the map between Willowford and Iron Ridge. MIS scouts had reported an old Dreadfang along the road. The magic box was located only a few days from the same area. Draven had heard the stories told in taverns. A dying Dreadfang sometimes transferred its vitality through a bite, leaving the recipient stronger, harder to kill, and capable of healing at an unnatural speed. Those are not merely stories, Corvin said. A Soulbearer can pass on strength, stamina, slower aging, and regeneration. Some restore a damaged limb in less than an hour. Draven looked from the map to the unconscious girl. You want it to bite her. Corvin did not deny it. And after that, you put her inside the box. If it tears her apart, she heals, and you put her back again. The wording is crude, but the principle is correct. I need her to survive long enough to produce useful data. How many attempts? As many as necessary. Draven rubbed a hand across his beard. You people at the MIS make hunters look civilized. You accepted the contract. I accepted the gold. That does not mean I have to admire the work. Draven then asked why Corvin had chosen him for an illegal mission capable of ending his career. If the truth came out, losing his hunter's guild license would be the least of his problems. Corvin had needed an experienced magic box user immediately. 2 hunters were available. Draven was an earth mage at rookie rank 5. Lucian, the other candidate, was a newly registered ice mage at rookie rank 2. Lucian possessed greater raw power, but he lacked experience outside protected territory. Besides, Corvin added, success gives you the achievement required to advance from rookie rank 5 to advanced rank 1. That part Draven had not forgotten. Corvin returned to the Dreadfang. The scout's report had been incomplete, and there were 2 possibilities. A Soulbearer used its final strength to pass its abilities to a new host. A Venomborn type used the same remaining power to create lethal venom and strengthen itself for one last battle. If the beast is a Venomborn type, Draven said, the girl dies and your experiment ends before it begins. Precisely. Draven raised his flask and took a long drink. Then I will handle the fighting, and you can continue handling the unpleasant possibilities. Before Corvin could continue, a quiet signal came from the darkness. The mana-powered 4-wheelers had arrived so softly that Draven noticed them only when the drivers waved. Corvin explained that each vehicle used 2 crystals, one for forward motion and one for reverse. The amount of mana supplied determined the speed. At a low pace, the machines traveled quietly enough to avoid attracting attention. Draven was at least grateful that the MIS had made such tools available to ordinary people. A journey of several days on horseback would have exhausted them before the mission even began. The newly arrived drivers brought the group's total to 9. Each mana-powered 4-wheeler carried 2 riders and included a rear storage compartment. The men had already packed food, magical items, and other supplies for a journey expected to last at least 2 days. Draven inspected every vehicle. One storage compartment had deliberately been left empty. He lifted the unconscious Elara and placed her inside it. Before departure, Draven gathered the men around him and delivered an enthusiastic speech. The road ahead was dangerous, he said, but fear could not be allowed to defeat them. They would fight for victory. Adventure, promotion, gold, and the pleasures their reward could buy. If they stood together and survived the next 2 weeks, they would return as legends and celebrate with apple wine. The men answered with a battle cry. They did not immediately leave the city's protected territory. Draven knew a hidden place where the group could spend the night without being observed. After 30 minutes on the road, they reached a broad cave in a small forest near the mountain. Corvin inspected the area while Draven ordered the others to move the vehicles and supplies inside. Once everyone had entered, Draven remained outside long enough to press both hands against the ground and scan the surrounding earth for movement. He sensed only small animals. No enemies had approached, and no one had followed them. Satisfied, he returned to the cave entrance and used his earth magic, raising both arms as though lifting an immense weight. He drew a thick wall of packed soil and stone from the ground until the entrance was completely sealed. The group established camp inside. Elara remained unconscious in the rear compartment of one 4-wheeler. Because Kalen had never said how long the drug would last, Corvin placed his bedroll nearby and claimed he would watch her through the night. The other adventurers gathered around the fire. Draven sat on the far side of Elara's vehicle and opened another bottle of apple wine from Kaelin's ranch, the ranch where he had first met the young guard. Corvin's attention soon shifted. From the sleeping girl to Draven. How did you convince a city guard to abduct a child? He asked. Draven nearly dropped the bottle. You have a talent for asking ugly questions without warning. He explained that Kaelin had looked troubled when selling wine from his family's ranch. The ranch was failing, debts were mounting, and Draven happened to be searching for the subject Corvin required. So you offered him gold for a random child, Corvin said. I offered him gold for a volunteer. Corvin stared at him. Draven sighed. I told him the miss needed a young person for secret aptitude tests. I said the child would return safely after a week. He did not believe that by the time we reached the campsite. No, a man who makes wine that good is not stupid. He was desperate. Kaelin's family owed money to violent creditors. When one payment arrived late, they cut off a finger from his younger brother as a warning. They threatened his sister next. Kaelin had only days to find the money. Why did he not ask you to remove the creditors? Corvin asked. Draven laughed once. Because removing them would solve his problem and leave me without your test subject. Corvin showed no discomfort at the answer. He only glanced toward the vehicle where Elara slept. Desperate people are easy to direct, he said. All that matters now is that the experiment succeeds. Success would bring Corvin promotion within the MIS, and raise Draven from rookie rank 5 to advanced rank 1 in the Hunters Guild. Once the matter was settled, the group prepared for the early departure. Corvin soon forgot his promise to watch Elara. Draven softened a patch of ground with earth magic, performed one final scan, and lay down beside his empty bottle. 6 hours passed. The sealed cave grew hot from the fire, while accumulating smoke made the air difficult to breathe. Insects crawled from cracks in the stone. A large spider eventually dropped onto Draven's face and woke him. He killed it with a nearby throwing knife, confirmed that it was not poisonous, and decided to scan the area again. Nothing outside had changed. Inside, however, the heat had driven more insects from hiding. Draven opened several narrow holes in the earthen wall to admit fresh air. Darkness still covered the forest. He checked his sleeping men, found no immediate problem, and returned to rest. Morning sunlight entered through the ventilation holes. One by one, the adventurers woke, packed their supplies, and prepared the vehicles. Corvin was the last to rise. By then, everyone else was ready. Draven kicked his leg and ordered him up. Without losing his composure, Corvin claimed he had not been asleep. He had merely rested his eyes while the men finished packing. After a brief discussion, Draven opened the sealed entrance. The vehicles left in single file because the road ahead was narrow. The first four-wheeler followed Corvin's map. A second carried 2 hunters ready to respond to danger. The third carried Draven, Corvin, and the sleeping Elara. The final vehicle served as the rear guard. They traveled for about an hour before Elara began to stir in the rear compartment. She stretched, yawned, and murmured that she had slept wonderfully. Then she opened her eyes and found Draven and Corvin watching her. Panic struck before memory returned. Who are you? Where are we going? Where is Kale? Draven signaled for the convoy to slow. He changed places with Corvin and sat facing her. Stop shouting! If you make the drivers lose control, I will throw you off the vehicle. Elara looked at the armed men around her and forced herself to be quiet. Good, Draven said. Now we can speak like reasonable people. Crystal, she muttered. He raised an eyebrow. What? It means I understand. Draven laughed. Then understand this. We kidnapped you. Elara ignored the word that should have frightened her most. What happened to Kaelin? He was with me. Draven claimed they had beaten Kaelin and left him in a gutter. Elara immediately cursed him. Corvin called back from the driver's seat. Stop wasting time. Kaelin is alive. He sold you and went home. That is a lie. He prepared the sleeping draft. He placed it in your hands. Elara's voice shook. We have been friends for 6 years. He is a city guard. He would never do that. Then, perhaps you were the only one who believed the friendship existed, Corvin replied. Liar. He turned his head sharply. Did Draven know which herbs you would recognize? Did any of us know the flavor of Kaelin's apple juice? He prepared it. The force of his voice silenced her. Draven sighed. You ruined the dramatic part, Professor. He introduced Corvin as the least entertaining member of the group. then gave Elara the simpler truth. They had needed a young subject. It had not mattered who. Kaelin had been running out of time, and she had been close enough for him to choose. 10 gold coins, Elara whispered. Was that all 6 years were worth? Draven did not know the exact price, and he did not care. To him, the abduction was a job. After a long hesitation, Elara asked whether they intended to harm her in another way. Draven's disgust was immediate. No. His answer came so quickly that she looked offended despite her fear. I meant because you are 14, he clarified, not because there is something wrong with your face. Corvin ordered him to stop joking. A hunter farther ahead made a vulgar remark, but Draven shut him down. No one touches the girl. She is essential to the mission. Bran, watch the road. Elara finally broke the silence by admitting she was starving. Draven handed her water, bread, and smoked meat. She inspected everything before taking a bite. Is there more sleeping medicine in this? If I wanted you asleep, I would not waste good meat. She tried to insist that she was 16 and too old to be called a little girl. Draven looked her over. My apologies, Grandma. You are 14, and you look 13. Elara stopped arguing. She drew the blanket around herself, lowered her head, and ate without speaking again. Draven made 2 attempts at conversation, received no answer, and finally left her alone with her thoughts. After slightly more than 3 hours, Corvin estimated that another 6 remained before they reached the location selected for the first phase of the plan. Draven welcomed the timing. It would give them several hours of daylight to scout. Entering a corrupted forest at dusk or after dark would be madness, even for a mage. Corvin added that magical corruption intensified deeper among the trees. Their anti-corruption crystals could protect them only while supplied with mana, and the crystals themselves could fail. A week or 2 of exposure might produce no obvious change, but longer periods could cause mutations or mental deterioration. Draven told him to spare the lecture. If Corvin wanted a student, he could educate Elara. Before he could say more, Bran signaled from the first vehicle. A large tree blocked the road roughly 200 meters ahead. Bran and the navigator advanced, alone to inspect it while the rest of the convoy remained at a distance. The tree appeared to have fallen at least a week earlier. Most of its leaves were gone, and those remaining were dry. Broken roots protruded from a broad hole in the ground, suggesting that no one had cut it down. The mud showed no human footprints, although several small openings led into thick bushes beside the road. Bran returned to his vehicle and called for Draven to scan the ground before attempting to move the trunk. Draven dismounted and ordered everyone to remain alert. As he crouched and placed a hand against the earth, Bran felt the vehicle begin to tremble. A heavy pounding came from the bushes and grew louder with every second. Draven sensed the threat almost as soon as it burst into motion. Bran, get out! A stonehide brute is charging! He tried to raise an earthen wall beside the vehicle, but the warning came too late. The stonehide brute crashed through the bushes and shattered the unfinished barrier. It struck the lead four-wheeler with the force of a loaded wagon racing downhill. The vehicle exploded into fragments, throwing Bran and the navigator into the trees on the opposite side of the road. The stonehide brute stumbled after the collision, but quickly regained its footing. Draven attacked before it could charge again. A thrust of his palm launched a massive stone spike into the creature's chest. The stonehide brute roared, fell, and tried to tear the spike free. 2 more stone lances struck from opposite sides and pinned its torso. The monster broke them with its hands. But Draven had already raised 4 earthen walls around it. When he brought his fists together, jagged spikes erupted inward from every side. Enraged and wounded, the stonehide brute smashed through the prison. The effort consumed its remaining strength, and it dropped to its knees. Draven ended the battle with 1 final spike rising from beneath the creature. The entire fight lasted barely a minute. While Draven faced the stonehide brute, the other hunters fought a pack of Mirakin that had attempted to ambush the convoy during the confusion. Once the attackers were dead or driven away, Draven scanned the ground for hidden movement. Several minutes passed before he was satisfied that no further enemies remained. He warned everyone that the immediate area was safe, but ordered them not to relax. Corvin stared at the wreckage in panic. Rather than ask about the 2 men who had been thrown into the trees, he began shouting about the map. Draven crossed the distance and slapped him. 2 men had just died, he said, and Corvin cared only about a piece of paper. The monster was dead, the surviving group was still capable of continuing, and the researcher needed to regain control of himself. During the argument, Elara quietly climbed from the storage compartment and approached the hunters near the second vehicle. She asked what would happen next. Draven's shouting frightened her, and no one had explained anything. One hunter, Roderick, asked his companion Theron to speak with her, because Theron was better with children. Theron introduced himself and asked her name. Elara was surprised Draven had not told them. Theron laughed. Draven probably did not know it himself. When Draven finally looked toward the third vehicle and saw the empty compartment, he assumed Elara had escaped. His anger erupted. He blamed Corvin for failing at the only task assigned to him. Roderick called back that the girl was with them and safe. Elara immediately assured Draven that she had not tried to run and asked him not to hurt her. Draven stopped shouting. He drew several slow breaths, rubbed both hands over his face, and apologized for losing his temper. Then he sent Theron and Roderick to inspect Bran, recover the navigator, and salvage anything useful from the destroyed vehicle. Draven initially ordered Elara back into the storage compartment beneath a blanket so she would not become an easy target for an archer. When she pointed out that remaining close to him might be safer, he accepted the argument and allowed her to stay nearby. While they waited for Theron and Roderick, Elara asked what kind of monsters had attacked. Draven had no desire to explain. Instead, he handed her his Monsterpedia, a field guide containing approximately 200 profiles covering creatures up to rookie rank 5. He also asked her not to speak to him. For a while, he needed to think, scan the surroundings, and regain his focus. Roderick found both men dead. The collision had thrown them hard enough that neither could have survived. He carried the navigator back to the road, then asked Theron to help retrieve Bran from the branches. Together, they brought both bodies to the convoy and reported their deaths. Draven told Elara to remain with Corvin while he went to confirm the loss. He knelt beside Bran, removed the dead hunter's guild tag, and asked whether Theron had recovered everything useful from the wreck. Most of the first vehicle's supplies were intact because it had carried little cargo. More importantly, Theron had found Corvin's maps. Draven considered giving navigation duty to Corvin, but Theron pointed toward the researcher, who was still visibly shaking. Instead, Draven asked Theron to take the maps. Theron spent several minutes studying them and concluded that the group remained roughly 4 hours from the planned campsite. Before leaving, Draven buried the dead. He used earth magic to open 2 graves, placed the bodies inside, and sealed them 6 feet below the road. Over each grave, he raised a simple stone marker and carved initials into its surface. Then he opened his last bottle of Aldrin Gold apple wine, poured 2 cups, and spilled them over the graves. Draven had known Bran for more than 20 years. Beneath the dead man's vulgar behavior, Draven called him a loyal friend and promised, with Aldrin Vaylor as his witness, to look after Bran's family. He had known the navigator only since hiring him for the mission and did not even remember the man's name. After an awkward farewell, Draven ordered the survivors to return to their positions. Elara climbed into the remaining vehicle's storage compartment and wrapped herself in the blanket Draven had given her. Draven used earth magic to remove the fallen tree from the road. Only 3 four-wheelers remained. Theron and Roderick led the convoy. Draven drove the middle vehicle with Corvin and Elara, while Merrick and Cedric guarded the rear. Draven told Corvin to move into the back and rest. In his opinion, Elara had shown more courage during the attack than the MIS researcher. Corvin obeyed without argument and lay down near the girl. Elara left a narrow opening in the blanket for light and opened the Monsterpedia. The first 4 pages contained basic rules for adventurers and magic box users. After that came profiles of monsters, magical beasts, and mutants, ordinary animals changed by corrupted mana. Elara began with mirelings, thin green creatures between 50 and 85 centimeters tall, armed with sticks, stones, crude blades, or anything sharp enough to carry. One alone earned only a 1-star threat rating, though a large group could still overwhelm a careless traveler. Mirakin came next. They resembled larger mirelings, standing between 95 and 155 centimeters tall, but they forged their own knives, short swords, and bows. Some even wore light armor made from wood or bone. They were also rated 1 star individually and usually appeared alongside larger mireling groups. A wheel struck a rock and jolted the vehicle hard enough to knock the monsterpedia from Elara's hand. She pulled the blanket aside and asked whether something had happened. Draven barely looked back. Only a rock. Stay under the blanket. Corvin had regained his composure and was watching the forest as they moved. Elara drew the blanket around herself again and returned to the book. Curious about corrupted wildlife, Elara turned to the mutant section. Blade hares could grow to twice the size of ordinary rabbits, and members of a pack often fought among themselves until their bodies were covered in scratches and old wounds. Their claws and teeth were sharp. A single blade hare remained a 1-star threat, but packs usually contained 10 to 20 animals. A full pack received a 2-star rating, and should be confronted only by a group of at least 3 experienced adventurers. Elara silently decided that running would be the wisest response if she ever encountered a large group of rabbits. The Scarhide direwolf was far worse. It grew 2 to 4 times larger than a normal wolf, with a heavily muscled body, sparse fur, oversized fangs, and long claws. One was rated 2 stars. The rare pack of 2 to 5 raised the danger to 3. Their aggression could become so extreme that they attacked one another when no easier prey was available. While Elara read, she overheard Merrick and Cedric talking from the rear vehicle. "Have you met Lucian?" Cedric asked from the rear vehicle. "The young man who just gained power from a magic box?" "I have," Merrick answered. "And after losing 2 men before the first objective, I am not interested in gossip." Cedric lowered his voice. "Fewer survivors means a larger share of the reward." Merrick turned on him. Their party was down to 1 box-powered mage, 4 ordinary adventurers, and 2 non-combatants. By any reasonable estimate, they had stumbled into an advanced rank mission. A 5-star rookie was the least of their concerns. "The mission only needs Cedric the Mireling Slayer," Cedric declared. "Say one more word and I will throw you off the vehicle." Elara lost her place while listening and turned instead to the section on magical beasts. The magical beast section opened with the corrosive hound. Its build resembled that of an ordinary wolf, but the color of its hide revealed the strength of its magic. Gray fur with a purple or red tint marked a 1-star threat. Black fur with a bright green tint marked a 3-star creature. Corrosive hounds generally lived alone and fought others of their species to the death. In addition to fangs and claws, they could spit corrosive liquid. The green variety produced acid strong enough to dissolve trees, stone, and metal rapidly. The guide recommended fighting all variants from a distance. Elara searched for the Stonehide Brute profile but could not find it among the many entries. More than an hour had passed since the ambush, so she risked asking Draven. He told her to look in the monster section near the beginning of the 3-star category. His anger towards Stonehide Brutes had not faded, and he promised to destroy any others he encountered. The profile described a large, dark green humanoid with enough intelligence to make armor or take it from defeated victims. Stonehide Brutes stood between 2 and 4 meters tall and could weigh from 250 to 450 kilograms. They relied on overwhelming strength, attacking with rocks, fallen trees, shields, or whatever else they could lift. Their most common tactic was a direct charge. Stonehide Brutes often traveled beside Tuskborn, Mirelings, Myrekin, Deepkin, and Grimjaws. The guide strongly advised against facing one alone. At least 1 magic box user should be present. Elara looked up from the Stonehide Brute entry. "You defeated one alone even though the book says a magic box user should never fight it without support." Draven kept his eyes on the road. "The book gives advice for people who want to stay alive. I am a 3-star Earth Mage, and that Stonehide Brute was not especially strong. It still destroyed a vehicle. Strength is not the same as intelligence. It used an old trap and waited until we were distracted. Never assume a lower-ranked creature is harmless." Elara turned several pages, then asked what the star rankings actually measured. Corvin answered so Draven could continue driving. Most magic boxes were enormous cubes, roughly 4 meters in each direction, though their colors and decorations varied. The box ahead of them was black, covered in gold patterns and red gems. "When someone survives a trial," Corvin explained, "the MIS or Hunter's Guild measures the amount of magical energy absorbed. That result determines a rank from 1 to 5 stars. So staying inside longer gives more power? Only when compatibility allows it. The box does not reward stubbornness. It destroys people who cannot endure the pressure. How long would someone need for 5 stars? Approximately 20 hours. Elara stared at him. Inside a box no one understands? Lucian survived it, Corvin said, and the irritation in his voice made it clear that he disliked the young ice mage's success. That is why he is now classified as a 5-star user. Before Elara could ask more about him, Theron raised a signal from the lead vehicle. Several dead animals lay across the road. He ordered the convoy to stop and asked Draven to scan the area. Draven dismounted before the request was complete and searched the ground for movement. After 5 minutes, he detected nothing within 200 meters. Theron and Roderick examined the nearest bodies. 3 adult reindeer lay in a staggered line leading from the road toward the forest, each approximately 10 meters from the next. The first had been killed by a single, immensely powerful claw strike. Huge tracks showed that the predator had chased the herd from one side of the forest to the other before catching them in the open. The second reindeer had been killed by a bite to the neck. When Roderick reached the third body, he discovered that it was still warm and partly eaten. He shouted for Draven to continue scanning. The predator had been feeding only moments earlier, and had probably hidden when it heard the vehicles approaching. Draven struck the ground with his fist. Earth rose around the convoy, forming a protective dome over the vehicles and everyone nearby. Roderick was still outside because he had moved too far down the road. He ran toward the opening while a harsh scraping sound came from the trees behind him. Draven held a narrow entrance, open until Roderick crossed the threshold, then sealed it. Inside the dome, darkness and confinement turned confusion into panic. "What happened?" Cedric demanded. "Why did you bury us alive?" "Is another monster attacking?" Elara asked. Corvin sounded almost excited. "It may be the Dreadfang from the scout report." "Quiet," Draven said. "The dome is a precaution. I have not confirmed anything." The moment Roderick slipped through the entrance, something heavy landed outside the exact place where the opening had been. Draven sealed the wall. Cedric pointed toward the ceiling. "At least make a hole so we can see. I am scanning. There could be a monster standing against the wall," Roderick warned. Cedric laughed. "Experienced hunters hiding from a large dog. Very impressive." Draven's voice went cold. "One more joke, and I will introduce your skull to an earth spike." Several minutes passed without movement beneath the ground. Cedric proposed a small viewing hole. He would look outside for 1 minute and report what the creature was doing. "It is a bad idea," Draven said. "The great Cedric the Mirling Slayer can survive one little glance." Tired of arguing, Draven placed him against the wall and opened a narrow gap. Sunlight flooded the dome. Cedric lifted one hand to shield his eyes. A black-furred arm shot through the opening. The claws closed around his head and dragged him outside before Draven could trap the limb. Draven sealed the wall again, but one of Cedric's legs remained inside. Silence followed. Draven pressed both hands to the ground. Through the soil, he felt the creature walking toward the forest, with Cedric's body trailing behind it. The movement continued until it passed beyond his range. Merrick rounded on him. "You called this an easy mission. 3 men are dead." Draven opened a barred vent near the top of the dome, letting in air and thin shafts of light. "Nothing beyond the protected territory is easy." Cedric ignored a direct warning. "Bran and the navigator died because we walked into an ambush. Their deaths matter, but pretending the road should. Be safe will not bring them back. Can we still succeed?" Merrick asked. "Gold is useless to corpses. We can, if no one makes another stupid decision." Merrick checked the sun through the vent. They had roughly 4 hours before sunset, and perhaps 2 more before the forest became impossible to cross safely. Theron proposed drawing the Dreadfang onto open ground. Fighting between the trees would favor the beast. If they followed the fresh trail immediately, they might choose the battlefield before it returned to the dome. Roderick agreed. The Dreadfang had met unexpected resistance and was unlikely to attack the same wall again at once. Theron offered to act as bait, while Draven remained close enough to scan the soil. Once the beast entered the clearing, Draven could lock its legs in stone. "If my spell misses," Draven warned, "the bait dies." Theron, Roderick, and Merrick accepted the risk. Turning back through the same forest no longer promised safety. Corvin looked from one hunter to another. And who protects me? The dome is almost a meter thick. You and Elara stay here. Elara looked toward Draven. What happens if you do not come back? If I die, the magic holding the dome collapses. He did not soften the answer. Then you and Corvin will have to survive on your own. Draven opened the wall and led Theron, Roderick, and Merrick outside. Before leaving, he distributed flashbang crystals and stunning crystals. They were to use them only if the beast came too close. Otherwise, move in silence. The trail left by Cedric's body led deeper into the forest. The trees were not as dense as expected, allowing the hunters to spread out while preserving sight of one another. Theron took the front. Draven remained in the center, with Roderick 20 meters to his right, and Merrick the same distance to his left. 10 minutes later, they found Cedric's body left against a large tree. Beyond it lay a broad clearing. Draven quietly identified the opening as a good place for an ambush. Theron agreed. The terrain offered long sightlines, several rocks for cover, and enough room for the beast to expose itself. Before Draven could report what he sensed, a rhythmic noise echoed from farther ahead, like an axe striking wood. His earth scan detected something large near the edge of its range. The group advanced slowly toward the center of the clearing. As the sound grew louder, Draven finally identified a massive creature roughly 200 meters ahead. It appeared to be scraping or sharpening its claws against a tree, and had not yet reacted to them. Then the wind shifted toward it. Roderick warned that their scent would soon carry across the clearing. He was strong, but not fast enough to serve as bait. Theron volunteered. His agility gave him the best chance of escaping the first attack. The scraping stopped. Theron moved into the open. Draven, Roderick, and Merrick crouched behind rocks and tall grass with the stunning crystals prepared. Draven sensed the creature approaching and warned everyone to be ready. A huge figure emerged cautiously from the bushes. It stood close to 3 meters tall, with thick limbs, enormous clawed hands, and the shape of a monstrous man covered in dark fur. For a moment, it appeared ready to charge Theron. Then it caught the scent of the hidden hunters and disappeared into the brush again. Theron shouted after it, trying to provoke an attack. The beast answered with strategy rather than rage. It burst from the bushes holding a sharpened log and threw it across the clearing. The weapon passed several meters from Theron because he had never been the true target. It struck Merrick in the torso and hurled him backward into the rocks. At the same moment, the beast charged Theron and swept a claw toward his head. Theron ducked, rolled away from its path, and threw both a flashbang and a stunning crystal into its face. He closed his own eyes as the first crystal exploded. The Dreadfang was blinded. The second crystal burst with electrical energy and froze its body for a brief instant. That instant was enough. Draven transformed the soil around the creature's feet into a thick, cement-like mass, then raised heavy blocks around both legs. Theron escaped to safety while the blinded Dreadfang roared and struck wildly. Once its sight returned, the creature examined the restraints and began tearing at the stone. The blocks held. Rather than remain trapped, it attacked its own lower legs and forced itself free, relying on its unnatural regeneration. The Dreadfang fell backward. The injuries closed almost immediately, and new bone and muscle began forming. Draven responded by trapping both arms in the same manner. The creature struggled, bit the stone, and roared, but could not break the new restraints. This time it stopped resisting and waited for its legs to regrow. Draven estimated that full regeneration would require approximately 40 minutes. He told Theron and Roderick to bring Corvin and Elara. Theron first asked whether other monsters might attack, and why the researcher and the girl were required at the scene. Draven seemed surprised. He had apparently explained the plan in a tavern a week earlier. Roderick reminded him that everyone had been drunk. Draven then assured them that the Dreadfang's presence had driven away nearby animals and lesser monsters. As for Corvin, he probably needed to record the experiment. Elara, Draven admitted, was intended for the beast. Theron reacted with disbelief. Roderick had already reached the same conclusion, though he had not known beforehand. Draven tried to frame the plan as an attempt to give Elara power. Corvin believed she would survive and inherit the Dreadfang's abilities. Draven could not explain the research more clearly, but ordered them to trust him and hurry. Theron's objection vanished when he remembered the promised gold. Roderick pointed out that Draven could open the distant dome from within his Earth scan range, so the two men left at once. They reached the shelter in approximately 10 minutes. Draven sensed their arrival and opened a passage wide enough for a vehicle. Corvin ran toward them, asking whether the beast had been captured. Theron told him the operation had succeeded and ordered him to calm down. Roderick climbed into the driver's seat beside Elara. She asked what had happened and where Draven was. Roderick refused to explain. Everything was fine, he repeated, and they were going to meet Draven. Theron drove Corvin from the dome while Roderick followed with Elara. Less than 10 minutes later, they reached the clearing. The Dreadfang's legs had almost completely regenerated. At the sight of the vehicles, it resumed struggling. The group stopped about 40 meters away and joined Draven behind the rocks. Corvin was delighted. The creature's black fur had begun fading toward gray, confirming that it was old and near the end of its life. More importantly, he believed it was the Soulbearer they needed. The Dreadfang attacked the restraints around its arms, trying to free itself before the hunters could act. Draven prepared another spell, but Corvin urged him to wait. Every effort exhausted more of the beast's remaining power and pushed it closer to the state required for transfer. The creature finally sacrificed its trapped forearms to escape. Before it could turn or charge, Draven raised a thick enclosure around its body. Only the head, neck, and severed limbs remained outside the stone prison. Corvin called the result perfect. They needed only to wait until the fur became fully gray. Then the dying Soulbearer would be ready for a new host. Farther from the imprisoned beast, Roderick remained beside Elara and watched her while drinking from his flask. Unaware of the role she was expected to play, Elara continued reading the Monsterpedia. She turned to the section on aquatic monsters. The first entry described the aqua ooze, a slow mass of water-based gel capable of hardening its body. Most were green or bright blue. Because they had no fixed shape, their size was measured by volume and ranged from 1 to 250 liters. Aqua oozes attacked by engulfing victims or entering the body and preventing them from breathing. They appeared in rivers, waterfalls, ponds, and lakes. Although rated at only 1 star, ordinary physical attacks had little effect. Alcohol was the recommended defense because the creatures reacted strongly to it. After finishing the profile, Elara looked toward Roderick. "So, Mr. Big Manly Man," she began. Roderick gave her his name and told her to use it. If she absolutely required a title, she could call him Roderick, the Tusk-born Skull Crusher. Elara asked whether he had ever fought a aqua ooze. "I have fought several," Roderick said. "They are not difficult if you understand how they hunt. The guide says they enter the body. How? They wait for someone who is sleeping or unconscious, crawl through the mouth, and settle in the lungs or stomach. Without help, the victim usually dies. So if one gets inside, that is the end?" "Not necessarily." Roderick raised his silver-coated flask. "Adventurers do not carry alcohol only because we enjoy drinking. A mouthful can force a aqua ooze back out, though the treatment is unpleasant." Elara finally understood the note in the guide. Roderick told her to keep reading while he watched the clearing. Elara asked one more question. Had Kaelin said anything about her before leaving? Roderick had never met him. Elara was already unconscious when he joined the group. Disappointed, she thanked him and turned the page. The next aquatic creature was the numbsting slug. Approximately 30 centimeters tall and more than a meter long. Tentacles around its mouth injected a numbing poison into prey. Once the victim could no longer move, the slug began feeding. While Elara read, Corvin removed documents from his bag and reviewed his notes. Draven continued scanning the surroundings for threats. Draven drank from his flask and silently praised Kaelin's apple wine. If he survived the expedition, he intended to buy enough for an entire year. Corvin noticed his amusement. "What is so funny?" "Your face. I should have known better than to expect a serious answer." He inspected the Dreadfang again. The creature's regeneration had slowed and then stopped. Its fur had faded almost completely to gray, its movements were weak, and blood had begun to seep from the old injuries. Corvin estimated that the transfer phase could begin in 20 minutes. He was relieved that the Dreadfang showed none of the signs associated with a venom-borne type. "So it bites her, and simply gives her the ability?" Draven asked. "Stop ruining the moment and prepare your men. Theron and Roderick know the signal. When I wave, they bring her. Corvin warned him not to lose his nerve now. The reward was enormous, and successful research could secure Corvin a powerful position within the Miss. My men will do their part, Draven said. You will pay every coin you promised, every coin and more if the transfer succeeds. If the magic box trial works afterward, both of us become wealthy and influential. Drops of blood began falling from the Dreadfang's leg. Soon the same signs appeared around the other restrained limbs. Corvin excitedly told Draven that the moment had arrived. Draven studied the creature, then turned and waved to Theron and Roderick. Elara had just finished reading about a carnivorous plant when Theron and Roderick approached the vehicle. Get down, Roderick ordered. You are coming with us. Elara looked past him toward the creature imprisoned in stone. Why do I have to go near that thing? Ask Draven. Move. She climbed down, complaining that he did not need to shout. The moment her feet touched the ground, Roderick seized one arm, and Theron caught the other. The grip was too tight to be an escort. Why are you holding me? Draven rose from beside the rocks. They are not going to hurt you. Relief barely had time to appear before he added with a thin laugh, the beast might. Elara tore one arm free and turned to run. Theron caught her again before she had taken 2 steps. Keep moving, Draven said. It has to bite her. For a second, Elara did not understand the words. Then Theron and Roderick began dragging her toward the Dreadfang. No. Stop. Her shoes scraped through the dirt. She kicked, twisted, and tried to throw her weight forward, but the 2 men were stronger. Draven, tell them to let go. I have done nothing to you. No one answered. She called to Theron, then Roderick, promising she would stay quiet, surrender every possession she owned, and tell no one what had happened. Their hands did not loosen. The distance between her and the Dreadfang disappeared 1 step at a time. I am only 14, she cried. Please, I will not tell anyone. They continued. When they stopped, Elara felt the creature's breath against the back of her neck. Her body went rigid, and tears ran down her face. The dying Dreadfang lunged. Its jaws locked around her torso. Elara screamed and struck at its muzzle, but it did not release her as Corvin had predicted. Theron and Roderick stepped away while she fought helplessly against the hold. I hope all of you die. Pain and shock blurred the clearing. Memories of Kalen, the training yard, the apple juice, the firelight. His apology collapsed into one unbearable sense of betrayal. Corvin stared at the Dreadfang. This is taking too long. It should have released her after 1 bite. Draven emptied his flask. And what exactly do you expect me to do? Their argument gave the beast the moment it needed. A dim purple glow spread beneath its gray fur. The Dreadfang tightened its hold and twisted, swinging Elara sideways into Roderick. The impact knocked the larger man from his feet. Theron jumped back and reached for the 2 swords across his shoulders. The beast reversed the motion and hurled Elara toward him. She struck Theron before he could fully draw. They crashed to the ground among the half-unsheathed blades. Elara landed nearby, badly injured and slipping into shock. One of Theron's own swords had opened a severe wound in his neck. He searched his clothing with weakening hands and found the healing crystal that had cost nearly everything he owned. It could still save him, but only if he supplied it with mana. His strength was already gone. Theron stared at the useless crystal as the clearing darkened around him. Cut down by my own blade, he whispered. All that gold for this crystal, and I cannot even use it.